somatic markers briefly again for us?
So that concept comes from Antonio Damasio, right? So Damasio says that in our body we have these markers or these sensory things, right? And they're not like in the body, they're actually the brain's representation. So a simple thing, let's do a test. You know, scientists have to be empirical, so they have to make a test. So they have the thing called the Iowa gambling test, 5 decks of cards. In those decks of cards, the decks are stacked. So some decks you're going to get more winners, some you're going to get more losers, and you start to play the game. But at the same time, they're hooking you up to your autonomic nervous system. They're hooking you up to a sweat response, or what we call galvanic stimulation. So basically, you know, when your autonomic nervous system goes off, it changes the tension in the muscle. You start to sweat, changes the conductivity. There's various markers, right? Simple thing, like a lie detector. That tests. That's exactly what it does. It tests the autonomic nervous system, right, and your response to stress, right? So simple thing. They hook you up to that. Now you play this game. A normal person after 40 or 50 tries says, give me a card from that one, because they begin to sense cognitively that the game is rigged. But if you're hooked up to the somatic marker machine, the somatic marker goes zzz after maybe 8 or 9 or 10 tries, right? So it's meaning it goes off when you make the wrong choice. Let me make that clear. It picks up when you're making the wrong choice. Now, you're not getting it here, but you're getting it here. So, and then somatic markers are the emotional often representations. So in our work, when we start working with the body, we're talking to the person, all of a sudden they'll get a sense or feeling inside their body. And then we'll say, well, let's go into that feeling. Let's explore it. Let's see where it takes us. That's a universal. And then all of a sudden, as they start to feel it, boom, a memory comes up. Boom, an emotion comes up. Then they start to connect the two, right? And as they connect the two, they begin to resolve the two. They begin to change the two. But it can also the direct sensory stimulation in a certain area may trigger a memory or an emotion, another form of marker, right? But if you know how to use this, it can be a huge therapeutic tool, as opposed to just sitting there and trying to dialogue with somebody, you know, especially in your mental health. Okay, so tell me what happened next, and then where'd that go, and then could you repeat that, what happened? So even not saying that, of course, there's tremendous benefits, and in mental health, I mean, as in all therapies, one of the key things that came out of that was the understanding of what they call the therapeutic alliance or therapeutic relationship, the sacred relationship where 2 or more are gathered, and there's this trust, there's this understanding. And so they found that a mental health practitioner, when they had that, regardless of the therapy they were doing, it took it to a new level. So you're saying, why does it work sometime and not? That's one of the key ingredients, bringing us back to the original question, is that relationship with you, their body, and the therapy. If that sacred relationship is not established, they don't get it's okay. Because you're asking them often to go into some of the most private, protected, painful, untapped into experience, and they think it's going to generate more pain. It's like, why do I want to remember that? Why do I feel? What no one ever taught them, it's only temporary, and if you go in, the only way in is out, and if you go in, boom, it just like pops the balloon and everything changes. But that's a critical point, and it took us many years of trial and error to figure it out, and to catch somebody moment to moment when they dissociate. Now, a good therapist talking to you can tell you when you dissociate. You start rattling off, you start thinking about Publix, you start thinking about something else, your talk changes, your body posture changes. But somatic dissociation is a whole different world, you know, and somatic dissociation means a loss of body-based information. And so when you somatic dissociate, you shut down. But when you shut down, you can't feel what's good for you. You can't feel what's bad for you, and you have no relationship to pathology or early detection, but you lose all the joy parts because you've kind of pushed a bubble around you. And when you put a bubble in it, you stop feeling. You're trying to stop feeling the bad, but you also stop feeling the good. And then life loses its meaning. I mean, this is such a critical point. I cannot overly emphasize that. That's a turning point, I believe, in the entire the developmental system in humanity, if we get that across the board, I don't care what therapy you're doing, learn to recognize it, learn to create support. And for some people, you know that too, Jim, that some of these people are very traumatically, they've been really wounded and very hurt. I mean, they can only take maybe about that much, few seconds of talk. Or you can't even come in certain directions, you know. So you have to gradually build up, but eventually, you know what, oh, I can stay there. And I can deal with these feelings. I don't have to shut myself down. I don't have to run away, or I don't have to shoot it into my neck to make severe pain. As Sarno said, was a very interesting thing. They said a lot of times pain is a distraction away from the real issue. A distraction away from what really is going on inside them. And that pain is thing, you can deal with pain, but you can't deal with rejection. You can't deal with loss. You can't deal with grief, and you can't deal with shame. And those are just, as the great teachers are like, they're just temporary states. And if they're bodily states, and if you learn to negotiate in your body, just like a tight muscle, believe it or not, right, you can be able to release it. And you can change your association with it. It's like you're being able to get stuck, or in classic Eastern philosophy, attachment. But attachment means being attached to it and not getting out. And we know in pain too, and all the research in Fermi and others is this with the neurofeedback, in that there's a very limited scope of attention. Like they can't broaden their attention to get out of the nightmare, so they just keep focusing on the same thing. And obsessive compulsive, we know that. It's like the same thing. And pain, it seems, often is the same thing. It's like you're wired in the same way. And so say in neurofeedback, they'll start experimenting with trying to broaden it. We will try to give people different stimuluses on the outside to hold their attention a little bit and bring them back in. Okay, now listen to the music, now come out. Listen to my fingers, come back in. So they start to broaden their aspects of attention to break these cycles, because we want to rewire. We literally want to rewire, develop new pathways, because once you develop the pathways, once you learn to ride the bike, we don't have to relearn to think it again.
Would that be the same about people having pain on certain times of the day, like at night before bed, or I only get my pain between 11 and 6, is 11 and 2? Would that kind of be the same kind of thing? Because some of it that Dr. Jono has quoted in his book is that we have these conditioned responses and program responses. And through this process, could that also break that program?
Sure. So what we want to do, anytime you can bypass the conscious mind and get into the unconscious, it's going to reveal itself. So it's like, instead of sitting there and trying to analyze, and why is that, and maybe it's this meridian, because acupuncture will say, well, energy's in this meridian at this certain time. There are circadian rhythms of all kinds of things, but it's so amazing because you can bypass all that and open up the unconscious. It has all the answers. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the story. It doesn't matter what happens. You don't have to remember. You don't have to discuss it. Even though all those have their places at certain times, it's just that when you rewire, when you open that doorway, when you engage that reflex, it doesn't matter. It's just going to do what it needs to do. And that's it wants you to evolve. It wants you to be more conscious. It wants you, believe it or not, as the frontal cortex opens up, it wants you to be more compassionate. It wants you to be more present. It wants you to be more sensitive. It wants you to be less self-centered and self-absorbed. I didn't make it up. That's what that doorway opens up. And it wants you to be in every context that we know. Where a person would say, oh, that's a spiritual person. The highest quality of a spiritual person, whether Eastern or Western, has always been compassion. Compassion for others, putting life first, rather than being obsessed with their own pain and their own suffering. Now, it's not something you can do by cognitive exercise. It has to be an internal experience. And when that doorway opens, you're not going back. Like Ebenezer Scrooge, and everyone knows that story. In A Christmas Carol, right? It's like there's a moment of something that shifts. He chooses that new state. He actually has joy now in giving. He actually finds compassion, which he didn't have before. He's not doing because he's afraid of the ghost or afraid of death. He realizes, my God, I've gotten a second chance. And this feels a hell of a lot better than living in survival, protection, my ego, and all these other things, because I didn't know any better.